April 18th, 1943. Over the vast Pacific, the air thickened with extreme tension. Suffocating heat radiated from the roaring Allison engines of the 16 P-38 Lightnings, cruising just above the waves for their top-secret mission. Inside the cramped cockpit of Lightning 147, Lieutenant Rex Barber felt the sweltering heat closing in. Sweat poured in streaks from under his leather flight cap, stinging eyes that remained fixed on the distant horizon. This was no routine patrol. This was a high-stakes gamble codenamed Operation Vengeance. Their ultimate quarry was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor disaster, now dead in the sights of the American pilots. To the Americans, Yamamoto was more than a brilliant admiral. He was the symbol of an unforgivable enemy, the man who once arrogantly claimed he would dictate peace terms to Washington from within the White House itself. The American flight from the 339th Fighter Squadron was executing a masterpiece of military aviation, flying over 400 miles just above the waves to evade Japanese radar, a journey demanding absolute radio silence and iron discipline. Barber gripped the controls tight, knowing a single mistake, a stray dip, or an accidental radio signal would collapse the entire plan. U.S. intelligence had decrypted Yamamoto's itinerary down to the minute, providing a narrow window. The admiral was scheduled to land at Balalai Island at 9:35 a.m. Their mission was simple but brutal. Prevent this arrival by delivering death in the sky. As the lush coastline of Bougainville rose into view, focus intensified. As the green coastline of Bougainville appeared, Barber scanned the heavens with intense focus. According to the plan, they were to intercept a single Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber carrying the admiral, escorted by 6 Zeros. The bomber would be escorted by 6 Zero fighters, circling like hawks. 12 Lightnings would climb to form a protective umbrella, while the 4-ship killer group, led by Thomas Lanphier, would dive straight for the target. But the battlefield is always a place of cruel surprises. At 9:33 a.m., a voice crackled through the headsets, shattering hours of silence. "Bogies! 11 o'clock high!" The enemy formation emerged from between the white clouds. Contrary to intelligence, there were 2 Betty bombers, not one, flying low and shielded by 6 Zeros. The American pilots were stunned. Which one held Yamamoto? Hesitation could mean failure, and the answer flashed instantly. Their choice was clear: we'll take them both. But as they prepared to strike, the plan fractured further. Besby Holmes's auxiliary fuel tanks were jammed and refused to release, making his aircraft dangerously sluggish for combat. In a dogfight, a Lightning carrying heavy drop tanks is like a bird with stones tied to its feet. Barber watched anxiously as Holmes broke formation, banking and diving sharply in a desperate attempt to shake them loose. Wingman Raymond Hine quickly followed to cover his teammate. Hine understood that leaving Holmes alone was a death sentence. He sacrificed his optimal attacking position to protect his friend's flank, leaving the group with only 2 strikers. Now, the killer group was left with only Barber and Lanphier to face the entire Japanese escort. Opportunity seemed to be slipping away. They had double the targets and only half the intended combat strength. On the other side, in the passenger cabin of the first Betty, Admiral Yamamoto sat in silence. His hands rested on his samurai sword, his eyes fixed out the window as if contemplating the Empire's waning fortunes. In the second, Betty, Chief of Staff Matome Ugaki, was drifting in and out of sleep, exhausted from grueling work. That peace was shattered when an escort Zero suddenly streaked past, rocking its wings frantically in warning. Ugaki jolted awake, seeing dark shapes charging from the sea. The radio operator screamed for the pilot to dive. The heavy bomber lurched, plunging toward the treetops in a desperate bid to escape the incoming Lightnings. The battle erupted with breathtaking speed. 3 escort Zeros immediately dove to intercept the 2 P-38s. Lanphier, protecting Barber, decided to break formation and climb to engage the Japanese fighters head-on in the clouds. Streams of 20mm fire from the Zeros stitched across the sky, striking Lanphier's wing. The sound of bullets hitting the aluminum fuselage rang out like hail on a tin roof, but Lanphier didn't flinch, holding his course. Lanphier held his thumb on the trigger, pouring out fire until the Zeros were forced to scatter. Now, Barber was alone, a solitary figure in the sky with 2 Bettys fleeing in opposite directions across the horizon. He chose the bomber heading toward the dense jungle and firewalled his throttles. But Barber wasn't alone for long. A Zero had caught up, latching onto his tail and opening fire with deadly precision. In that moment, a hunter's instinct took over. Barber suppressed the urge to break away for self-defense. He knew if he gave up now, Yamamoto would escape into the safety of the jungle. He focused his entire being on the massive bomber ahead, the Hamaki, as the Japanese called it, or the flying lighter to the Americans for its fatal tendency to ignite under machine gun fire. Barber squeezed the trigger. 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm nose cannon roared in unison. The rounds shredded the Betty's fragile skin, and fire immediately erupted from the bomber's crippled engine. A spray of black oil coated the air. Barber did not stop, even as he felt his own P-38 shuddering from hits from behind. He was willing to trade his life to bring this target down. The Zero on his tail suddenly soared over his head, perhaps carried by too much speed. This gave Barber a few precious seconds. He adjusted his lead and fired again, slamming rounds into the left engine. Yamamoto's Betty performed a sickening, uncontrolled roll and plummeted straight into the emerald canopy of the jungle below. Barber nearly clipped its wing as he streaked past, followed by a dull, heavy explosion. Yamamoto was dead. However, the fight was not over. Barber immediately banked to find the second Betty. By now, he found himself surrounded by 3 other Zeros, firing relentlessly from multiple angles. They fired without stopping, forcing Barber into a deep dive toward the trees to find speed. The clatter of bullets striking his tail echoed in the cockpit, a constant reminder of how close death was. Just as hope faded, Barber saw the silhouettes of Holmes and Hine charging in. Tracers erupted from their aircraft, streaking directly toward the Zeros to drive them off Barber's tail in a heart-stopping rescue. The lightnings roared overhead, and in an instant, the sky became eerily quiet. The Zeros scattered, leaving Barber alone to breathe the cold, precious air as he stabilized his damaged aircraft over the Pacific. By now, Holmes and Hine had caught up to the second Betty carrying Ugaki, which was trying to escape out to sea. Holmes dove in, pouring a rain of lead into the giant target. Rex Barber, despite his damaged plane, did not hesitate to assist. He closed in on the Betty's tail and squeezed off his final rounds, hitting the fuel tanks and igniting a massive fireball. Barber flew through the explosion, flames licking his wings, but he emerged on the other side. Yet, true tragedy began to fall upon the American flight at the very moment they thought they had won. 3 Zeros dove from high above in an ambush. Raymond Hine, who had been devotedly flying cover for his comrades, became the most exposed target. A veteran Zero pilot locked onto Hine's tail. Barber and Holmes watched in horror as aluminum fragments tore away from Hine's right engine. White smoke, then thick black smoke, billowed from the Lightning, which had already taken multiple hits in the fight. "I'm hit! Engine's out!" Hine's voice crackled through the distorted radio waves. Those were the last words his comrades would ever hear from him, as his P-38 simply vanished into the mist and spray. When they touched down at Henderson Field, Barber climbed out of his cockpit, his body exhausted. He looked at the empty space in the parking lot where Hine's Lightning should have been, heavy with silence. At the site of the second crash, Matome Ugaki and 2 others were struggling amidst the burning wreckage. Ugaki was gravely injured, covered in blood, but had miraculously survived the catastrophic fireball over the water. Clinging to a piece of the wing, he looked toward the jungle where smoke from Yamamoto's plane was still rising, feeling an ultimate sense of shame for surviving while his supreme commander had perished. Yamamoto's death was a devastating psychological blow to all of Japan. A grand state funeral was held in Tokyo, with millions lining the streets to mourn the admiral they revered as a godlike figure. For Ugaki, the funeral only deepened his inner torment. He never forgave himself for surviving while Yamamoto lay in the jungle. For the remainder of the war, Ugaki fought like a man already dead inside. On August 15, 1945, when the Emperor announced the surrender, Ugaki chose his final path. Dressed in full uniform, he took the sword Yamamoto had given him and led a final kamikaze flight. He followed his friend, ending a chapter of history written in blood and tears. Raymond Hine never returned home. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for his heroic sacrifice as a shield. Rex Barber, the man who directly pulled the trigger on Yamamoto, survived the war, but carried the ghosts of that April morning forever. He often spoke of Hein's bravery, not the kill itself. What remains of Operation Vengeance is not just history, but the memory of courage, sacrifice, and the lives lost in the deep forest and dark sea on a day when the Empire's sun began to set. In 2003, Rex Barber was officially credited with the kill by the Air Force. Their story will forever be remembered as a testament to the brave spirit of the Lightning pilots in the Pacific Theater.